There are a lot of talking heads out there who are telling people that the magic pill that is going to cure their professional woes is going and buying a business. And it's a great disservice to many, many people.
Welcome to another episode of the Built to Scale podcast. Today's guest is David Hori, founder of Top Line Operators, and he's built a career doing something that most people never think about, buying businesses. David brings the heat and drops a number of hot takes that goes against almost every buy a business, get rich quick narrative out there. And he'll tell you exactly why that pitch is dangerous. Plus, he's got a great online community for people interested in buying and selling businesses. I'll put that information in the show notes. And while you're there, be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment. Now, if you're sitting, relax. If you're at the gym, pick up the pace because this episode is going to change the way you think about business. I'm your host, Shmuel Hirschberg, and this is the Built to Scale podcast. Listen up and let's start scaling now. So today's guest is David Hori. He's the founder of Top Line Operators, and he teaches people how to buy businesses and scale them. So today's episode is going to be amazing. David, welcome to the Built to Scale podcast.
Shmuel, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you just give us a little bit of your origin story? You know, where have you been the past few years and when you started Top Line Operators?
I'll back up to my life started in a corporate sense in big corporates. Think one of the largest global law firms in the world, think Microsoft, those kinds of companies. And what I found was a hunger, an insatiable desire to move really quickly and for ideas that I had to see the light of day. And that led me to smaller, faster companies until I landed in the world of VC-funded startups. And God's blessed me tremendously in that he partnered me with 3 different founders in the VC space who we've since been able to scale those businesses to exits. And the last
Amazing.
company that I was a part of was actually bought by Toyota in 2023, I think, maybe 22. After I helped transition them from a US-based company into a Japan-based company and those kinds of things, I decided, gosh, I want to do this for myself. It's been really cool building with some of the top founders in the world. And I've learned a ton, but I now I know how to grow something from scratch. And I want to be in the seat of the founder investor. And what's the most direct path to doing that without all of the risk associated with VC startups? And the answer that I arrived at, whether it's right or wrong to be determined, but right or wrong, buy a business that's already working reasonably well. Apply what I know to grow it significantly in a really consistent, stable way. And that's the birth of Top Line Operators. And that's been my focus since 2023.
Very cool. Very cool. What was that business that Toyota bought?
It was a little company called Carmera in the digital mapping space.
Oh, okay. So very relevant for cars.
Yeah, especially ones that you want to be very, very smart and potentially have self-driving capabilities.
Absolutely. So now you basically have, you're going into a business where you're actually teaching people, and you said before that you didn't want the risk. Is that something that you teach as well, or is that just a personal preference on your part?
I mean, my personal observation is that it was really hard and risky. There was multiple times where we were certain we were going to run out of money before we could ask for more in the startup sense. And we were building a company with millions of investor dollars. It doesn't get any easier than that, right? And so somebody that's out there trying to start a business from scratch and bootstrap it is a special breed of person. And again, like the numbers also support it that most businesses, I think I saw this morning, actually 65% of businesses that are started today will not be around 10 years from now. So it's just a risky endeavor.
For sure. So what's your strategy? And this will probably have to break down into multiple questions and go down the rabbit hole here. But let's just say an open canvas, someone says, hey, David, help me find a business to buy. What do you do?
Yeah. So the first thing you have to start with is clarity. what is your buy box is going to be one of the first questions that anybody that's kind of in this business buying arena, whether they're an investor, a buyer, a broker, that's what they're going to want to know. What they mean by that is, what are you uniquely positioned to go and acquire and add value to? And the more that you can have a specific focus, the better off it's going to be. I started off because all three of the startups I was in were very different. I had a construction GC, there was a mapping company, there was a enterprise SaaS company, right? Very different. I was like, I could go after anything. And that got me nothing. You probably can connect the dots on marketing, right? You advertise to everybody, you get nothing. So nobody. And so that was exactly my
What's the
journey.
saying? The cobbler's, the shoemaker's son goes without the shoes, right?
Indeed. And, so the first kind of few months of my journey was just realizing, okay, there is value in specificity. And that's my first point of advice. And then the second is really stay in your lane, right? You probably have a lot of interests and maybe some capabilities, but you want to go after a business where you can really dig in and add tremendous value from the outset. And you don't want to have to learn on the job. There's already going to be a number of challenges inherent with transitioning ownership that you're going to have to navigate and weather. And learning a new industry or, a different flavor of industry that you've maybe have some previous exposure to is not the optimal time. And so those are a couple of the like initial steps that I advise people on. And then it's about probably more things that you can speak to more directly in as connecting with sellers. Where do you go? Is it on market, which means that they've listed it publicly, probably through a broker? Or are we going to go after off-market deals where we're contacting business owners directly and initiating a conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that whole staying in your lane, people want to just go after everything and spray and pray and everything, but that whole idea of staying in your lane is so important. And I always think back to, let's say, swimming, right? And where you have to stay in your lane. If you touch those buoys on the side, you get disqualified, right? But the other thing about staying in your lane is that it affords you the quickest option, because if you're on one side of the pool and you're trying to get to the other side of the pool, a straight line is going to be the quickest way, staying in your lane. So that's really important. And when you're talking about someone buying a business, and so now that they've had that clarity, they understand like what they want, right? Are you or are they advisors, or how much do they need to actually roll up their sleeves and get into the nitty gritty of the business?
I'm kind of a lone voice on this topic, and I'm glad you asked this question.
By the way, David, we love lone voices here. Like, we love the hot takes. So bring it on with the hot sauce.
Yes. All right. Hot sauce is coming. So there are a lot of talking heads out there who are telling people that the magic pill that is going to cure their professional woes is going and buying a business. You don't like your boss? Go buy a business. You want to make more money? Go buy a business. You want to be, have time freedom? Go buy a business. And I think it's a great disservice to many, many people who then go and invest a lot of time and a lot of money in these endeavors. And there are very few players in this world that get to go and buy a business and hire a GM from day one, and they remain uninvolved by the day-to-day operations. And there's very few people that do that successfully and at scale. And yet those are some of the people that are saying anybody can do it. Now, can anybody do it? Technically, yes. The reality is, though, you're going to be deeply, deeply involved. The people that I see successfully acquiring businesses aren't just involved for 6 months or 9 months. It becomes the central focus of their life, and is for years often, because they probably haven't learned the skills of scaling and buying leverage and training and developing people. And that's why it's just like such a disservice to tell somebody that's maybe in a cubicle who's really brilliant in accounting, let's say, to go buy an accounting firm. Wait, you're skipping a lot of steps that you're going to have to learn on the job now with your own money, right? Like management and strategy and marketing and all these other things. And so I set the expectation from the outset. You're going to be in the business. You should plan to be in the business. If for no other reason, then you're going to be able to make smarter hires. There's no foolproof way that I've learned to hire 100%. but you're not going to hire a bunch of duds because you actually understand the outcomes and what needs to be delivered at a deep level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So you need to really understand the business. And here's like a zinger. Do you need to be passionate about the business, or you just need to understand it?
I'll say you could probably do it without passion, but it is going to be your life for a number of years and you have to commit to that course. And so, you don't have to be
Okay.
passionate about something to commit several years of your life to it, but it helps.
It definitely helps. But would you say that experience, understanding the business trumps passion?
Yes. Yes. I mean, again, can you overcome? There's plenty of people who have. Yes, absolutely. But, starting with that baseline of experience, tremendously powerful. And, there's ways around it. There's people that are dead set again on, like jumping on the bandwagon and going and buying an HVAC company. Well, then you better have a partner that you know and trust and have validated, not just a partner, know, trust and validated. You're aligned with values and a lot of other things who has that expertise and you can partner with them because you're the marketing or the accounting or finance, talent. That kind of thing happens if you're dead set on it. But I highly suggest you don't go it alone and just dive into HVAC if you come from finance.
Yeah, that makes sense. But also, if someone comes from HVAC as well, they need to know finance and business as well, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the biggest opportunity that I'm finding, especially with some of these off-market opportunities where I'm contacting business owners directly. A lot of them don't realize and have never thought about a partnership. And so they get bogged down carrying all the weight of payroll and the customer problems and all that. And they're wearing 7 or 8 hats. And when they start talking with a buyer like me, they realize, wait, I could just take off 6 or 7 of these hats and just focus on the piece that got me into the business. Well, then why would I sell? I would actually enjoy working in the business still. And that's like a really cool conversation to explore with some of these business owners is you're not an expert on business operations. You're an expert in being an HVAC tech. That's cool. That's really valuable. What if we partnered and I could bring scaling and hiring and all that infrastructure to bear and you can keep on being the subject matter expert because that'd be tremendously valuable to me.
So that's actually an interesting point. So it's not just a matter of just buying businesses. It's also just finding opportunities where you could contribute value that maybe a floundering business can use to resurrect itself and to start scaling. So you don't need to be all in per se. You can just be that person that that missing link that takes it from not even from zero to hero, but that pushes it over the top.
Indeed. Yeah. And Shmuel, it's something that I found was really interesting. In fact, I was speaking with so many business owners and we're kind of having the same conversations over and over that I started doing a weekly webinar for business owners that are exit curious. And it just covers kind of the basics, like what to expect, who you're going to meet, those kinds of things. And one of those things that we cover is that there are more ways to sell your business than many people think. Almost every owner I spoke with, imagine there's 100% sale. And as soon as you sign on the purchase sale agreement, you're
You're
off into
out the door.
retirement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole other spectrum of possibilities. And once you start to understand that, then you're like, wow, I'm talking to the wrong kind of buyer, or I'm positioning myself wrong in the market, or I can't sell as is, or wow, I didn't know if I was ready to sell, but now I am. There's all of those things that are included. And owners just don't know. Again, they're an expert in their trade.
Why don't you just unpack that a bit? Well, like if a full sale, what else is there besides a full sale?
Yeah, so we also just covered the partnership arrangement where you can bring in a partner to split the risk and the headache and take off a few hats. There is a staged or milestone driven one. This was one that I'm currently exploring with an owner, actually in the e-com space, and he does pop-up retailing as well. So he knows he wants to sell, but he's got ideas and gas in the tank. And he also really cares about his team and wants to make sure that the change to new ownership is very gradual. And so we're exploring like, great, stay involved. I'll slowly start to add value to your business. And at key milestones, more and more ownership will vest over to me and you'll take more and more of a backseat. So it's a really natural transition for vendors, employees, all those things. So there's a staged kind of milestone driven potential exit. You can exit to, a lot of people think about, oh, I'm going to give the business to my family member or whatever that is. That's a transaction. You can sell in to your employees. There's something called ESOPs where you can sell the business to the employees. There's a lot of reasons that that could be advantageous to people that they've never even thought of. There's all kinds of different transactions and different types of buyers, but those are some of the ones that I'd highlight.
That's very interesting. Also, just in terms of the family transition, you see a lot of family owned businesses, and you know, father to son, mother to daughter, whichever way it's going. But no matter what, there's always going to be a different person. Once there's a different person at the helm, businesses, you know, that ship jostles a bit, and it could be unweary for the employees. So it's important, obviously, to make sure that it's a smooth transition, right?
Indeed, indeed. And inevitably, even though it might seem like transitioning from like father to son, for instance, is going to be an easy transition, like to your point, employees are impacted, but vendors are also kind of gauging like, all right, we know their parent. What about like, is this kid going to be able to run this? Do we need to like start diversifying or looking elsewhere? And customers, the same. Like there's inevitably, we call it the J curve, where revenue and everything dips because of that transition and that, people kind of like, well, maybe this is a good time to find a new job, all those things that you have to account for. And the more that you can be intentional around that transition and have a plan in place, the more likely you are to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, definitely change is definitely scary, right? I don't think anyone's gonna, come in and say like, oh, my business just got sold, and I'm the director of operations, or I'm the marketing manager, or whatever, and I'm so excited that thing, the business got sold, and everything's gonna be hunky dory. There is that kind of period where you talk about in the J curve where things are going to go down, and people are going to be a little bit uncertain. So how do you mitigate that? Is that like set in stone, like a 6 month plan, like, or a 1 year plan? Like, how much time um, do you coach your business owners when they're looking to buy a business to kind of like, have that runway, so that J curve is almost like an L, I guess, maybe, or where it doesn't have that dip?
Yeah. I don't have a standardized playbook for this. The advice that I give is whatever you think is slow, you need to like double that timeline. And the problem is that so many people looking to buy a business, even before they buy it, during due diligence, they're seeing opportunities that are probably real and things that they want to change or they do differently. And then the moment they buy it, they go and implement a bunch of stuff, which actually, again, magnifies the kind of tumultuous period that the business is experiencing. And my advice is don't change anything day one. Give it a couple months. Embed yourself in the business. One of the best ways that I can gather context is to connect with, depending on the size of business. Is it all the employees and talk to them and understand like their role, their perspective, the opportunities, the frustrations, those kinds of things. Or maybe if it's a bigger company, I have to like triage and just go with leadership and then have those leaders have those conversations with lower level people. So that information is going to be really key because again, you're coming into it with a perspective that should be validated. And you don't know what the current state of the business is. Take some time to establish the current state and stabilize. All you're doing is stabilizing. Like, did anybody jump ship? Let's fill that real quick and then we'll stabilize. We have
Uh,
time, if you structure the deal right, to allow for an organic growth. And you're going to build on a much more solid platform if you understand first the actual state of the business and then implement strategically the most high leverage changes that are on your list.
Going back to boats, and you have one foot on the dock, and you want to just push off onto the boat, right, on a canoe or something. If you're too sudden with your movements, you're just going to be in the water. And what you're looking for is that smooth transition. And what about like in terms of, let's say, like owners and stuff? What's the biggest mistake that they make when they're looking to sell their business?
There's two that I'll highlight. They're very different. The first number one mistake is waiting to sell their business until they have to. They're forced into it. when time is not on your side, it's very unlikely you're going to arrive at an optimal outcome for you, your business, your employees, etc. So being proactive. Again, I talk to business owners all the time that are kind of standoffish, like, whoa, I don't even know if I want to sell, or I'm going to work till I die. You can choose to do that, but you should build your business to sell because that's just a well-run business. And then if something comes up unforeseen, you have that optionality to exercise. You get sick, or a divorce, causes you to like, oh gosh, now like the financial, load has changed, or even like I started this with a partner and now we've split, right? Those kinds of dynamics that force a sale are really, really bad outcomes for the business owner. So get educated, start a plan to be able to sell. You don't ever have to sell, but be able to sell and have that optionality. Guess what? That's just a well-run business that's going to stand the test of time, weather economic cycles, be investable. If you ever have this massive opportunity land in your lap and you want to go borrow money and capitalize on it, you're investable. It has all those benefits. And that makes it almost impossible to close on a deal.
What does that mean, taking your foot off the gas?
So you stop doing the things that drive revenue and performance in your business, because either you're tired, or you see the new ownership, kind of on the horizon. And so I might, look at a business and agree, Shmuel, your business is worth $1 million and I'm going to pay you $1 million. You're like, great. Oh, and you kind of relax. You stop pushing the sales calls. You stop, all that stuff. And now I'm trying to buy a business for $1 million that's only worth $800,000 now. And then we're trying to retrade it and it's still going down, 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 down in the wrong direction. And most often you actually can't come to a number afterwards that like it's both sides needs.
So once that business owner decides to sell, they really have to keep going. And sometimes that could be gut wrenching. Said you might not be vested in that. So so that's super important. But I do want to challenge you on something. You said every business needs to be created with the end goal of selling it. Why is that? Why can't someone just say, you know what, I'm having a business. I want to, let's say, even go to a family business, right? I'm going to pass this down to generation. It's going to be a generational business where we're the family, we build wealth and everything. And selling is not in our lexicon. So, but you're saying the opposite. So I'm asking you, why is that? Why do you believe that every business must be created to be sold?
Shmuel, I wish other hosts asked these kinds of questions. This is a really great conversation that I'm excited about. There are only, I'll give you the logic first and then I'll kind of address the question head on. There are only two outcomes for any given business. You sell or you close down. Many owners think that, shutting down sounds pretty neutral. You probably know 3 or 4 business owners that kind of got old, stopped taking on new business, wound things down and closed their doors. It is not neutral. It is extremely expensive, first of all, because you're still paying rent, you're still carrying inventory, you're still doing all those things, but now your sales are going down. It's really hard on your team. And a lot of business owners care about their team. And they're just along for this ride where they can see the writing on the wall, but they don't know when things are going to stop. And that's the last stop. And then it's the decision that I see owners regret the most. It's just like, gosh, I built something for maybe even decades and then I didn't get anything for it. I don't have anything to show for it. And guess what? A lot of these business owners which leaves selling. And you mentioned, family businesses. You can't control whether or not your family is going to want this business. And that's a really sad realization that so many people are confronted with. They assume that their kids are going to want it and the kids like the money that it comes from it, but they don't want to run a business. They actually, like a lot of times, the business was what kept mom or dad away from, being involved in their lives. Like there's a lot of reasons why family might not be interested and probably aren't. And so then if you built that as your strategy, your exit point, your plan, that's the only one that you can execute on. So again, building optionality is what I'm a huge proponent of. It's not that you should think about selling.
Okay.
But if you build a great business, it will be sellable, investable, all those other things.
Just having your options open and stuff, right? Yeah, I always tell my kids, like, in terms of just career and life, you just want to be able to open up doors and stuff. People could put out, let's say, job applications for a number of different high level positions, right? Especially in the public sector, for example. And everyone's more than welcome to send their resume over for those positions. But if you didn't open the right doors to get to the right place, no one's going to look at your resume. So it's actually making sure that those doors are open. So like when you're talking about just having the options for your business, it's doing your due diligence and making sure that the business is sellable, even if you don't want to sell it. So you just have that option. If something happens, and we all know life happens, and curveballs happen.
Well, even if you take the sunny day path, like let's imagine you build this business, and then it's time for you to transition it to your kids. Building a business that's sellable means that the business doesn't depend on you, that you've diversified your revenue streams and other things. There's not what we call concentration risk, where one customer, one vendor, could have a really outsized impact on you. You've documented how things are done in your business so that somebody else can run that playbook. Those are things that make a business sellable. And so even if the sunny day path happens where you transition it to your kid, it's just going to be an easier transition for anybody, especially your kid, to take over. And that's your gift to them. It comes wrapped up in a great bundle that you can transition over easily and seamlessly.
And because you didn't take your foot off the gas, it's still worth what it's worth when you actually sold it. Yeah. Yeah. So as much as I want this part of the call to go viral, right, when we cut this up, before we were talking, and you actually said that, going viral, most people, treat going viral as the goal, and that should be the be all and end all of what you do. But you actually had a different take on that. You want to share that with the audience?
So, I'm not a marketing expert, right? But I've been learning a lot about marketing in this endeavor. And one of the things that I focused and over indexed on, and so please learn from my mistakes, learn from them, was virality. I have a visibility problem. And so I'm doing a lot of things in my social media content to go viral. And what I realized is that when something hit, there wasn't substance to back it up. And that's what actually matters. It's not that a lot of eyeballs pay attention to me. It's then that I can actually help those people and they know that I can help them. And I've done the background work of establishing either that trust, the credibility, or I have, those indisputable wins readily available. And that's ultimately what this is about. It's not about being famous or making money. Those are kind of sometimes byproducts of success, but I actually am in this because I want to help people. And so then now I've completely shifted. It's like, how do I help people? How do I add as much value as I can? How do I add more value today when I wake up than I did yesterday? And it's completely flipped my mindset, my strategy, all of it. And you'll see that there's people that have, millions and millions of followers that go and try to start a product and they sell nothing because they have attention, but not loyalty, not trust, and a lot of those other things.
So is this something that you recently changed? Have you always thought this way in terms of doing business?
So in 2023, when I first started kind of dabbling with social media content, first off, I mean, my whole mindset has changed tremendously. I was a very private person. I didn't want to post. I was like, I'm going to pay somebody to do my marketing. I'm going to have a faceless brand. People buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And with this kind of vision of, this is what I want to do. This is my legacy, is buying businesses, growing them, helping business owners. That's like the biggest positive impact I can have on this world. Given my skill set is helping business owners, which are creating hundreds, thousands of jobs for people. Then I had to shift into, again, I need a personal brand, and that's going to transcend one transaction or one business. And again, it's about creating value. And how do I do that? By putting myself out there in a really authentic, vulnerable way, which is uncomfortable again for somebody that likes privacy, wants to be unknown, doesn't want to be in the limelight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I understand that for sure. And it definitely takes a little bit of gumption. So what are you spending most of your time on? Are you still buying businesses or are you coaching most of the time? How do you break that down?
Yeah, in April, I had two business acquisitions. I was positive they were going to close in April, and they didn't. A lot of things can kill a deal. And so up until that point, I was like 90% focused on business acquisitions. And I was putting all my time, money, and resources into business acquisition activities. In April, I
Okay.
decided I'm going to flip my calendar. I'm going to open it up to working with business owners who aren't necessarily looking to sell. And part of that was, again, I kind of built my business acquisition business. Well, I built it as a business. So now I've got systems and processes in place that allow me to do that really efficiently, evaluate things and move things through my pipeline so that I can do that with 10% of my time and work with business owners. And again, it's now I'm back to not just, earning money instead of just spending it at a
Okay.
crazy rate, but then, developing credibility and more industry expertise and nuance, those kinds of things that are additive, that, business owners are going to want to see from a potential business buyer.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So earlier we spoke about, finding your niche and just finding what you're good at, staying in your lane. Have you developed anything like that, like in terms of coaching, specific business owners, like, whether it's online businesses or laundromats or whatever it is? Is there anything that says, you know, to you, David, that, hey, I could really help this business owner sell?
Yeah. So my focus is trade businesses. Again, one of the businesses that we scaled to exit was a regional residential construction GC. And we had an in-house electrical team. We delivered our own construction projects. So that was the most fun I had. And I actually really enjoyed the industry and I'm doubling down on that. And so, like right now I'm working with an owner, who owns a restoration company, mold mitigation and, fixing your home or business after a flood or fire. I'm working with somebody, that owns a concrete polishing company. So like the trades are something that I'm doubling down on even though I've never like been somebody that swung a hammer,
Okay.
understanding what creates a business that is an employer of choice first and foremost, because most business people you talk to in the trades are like, oh, you can't find good talent. You can find good talent if you're an employer of choice, and we can create that with systems, tools, process consistency, etc. So that's one of them. And then again, I went the partner path. I couldn't choose anything, and I'm actually not like an expert in any given thing. Again, growing businesses is pretty broad, and so what I've gotten really focused on is finding great partners, and I have two. So one is in e-commerce, and he's the expert in e-com and in operations and logistics and supply chain and inventory management, all that. He owns a software business in that space. And then the other one is one I'm really excited about and making big investments in, which is water. So think well drilling, pumps, water treatment, water filtration, those kinds of things.
Very cool. Do you feel like that business just sells itself, water? I mean, because I guess it's just a need that everyone, humanity needs.
It is, and it's going to become increasingly, important. You live in a desert. I live in a desert. AI is coming to Boise, where I live, and is going to suck up even more water. So yes, but like the reason why it's so exciting is because there are, private equity firms and investors and business buyers out there that understand the value of buying an HVAC company or electrical company. All the reasons that they like investing in those kinds of companies apply to a well driller or pump installer, but there's just a lot less competition. And it's something that like has been better at keeping, like repelling, outsiders. And so having an insider who owns one of the largest well drilling companies in our area and has already scaled it and built a playbook for doing it again is kind of like that secret sauce and like the inside track to that. And so we're just getting started, but tremendous opportunity. And again, those are businesses that I assume my family member is going to want to take over, and they're finding actually they couldn't be less interested in digging holes in the dirt for water.
Huh. Yeah. So in terms of just like buying businesses and stuff, can you talk us a little bit about some due diligence stuff? Like what are just maybe like the ABCs of it? Like how do people go about it? Like, and let's talk to people like myself who really have never invested and bought a business, and but might be interested in it one day, right? What are the ABCs? What's the first thing that people have to do in terms of due diligence when they're buying a business?
Yeah. So first, you got to establish that there's a willing seller. I think I see a lot of people that talk to business owners and they get really eager and spend a lot of time and money on it. And they're talking to somebody that's kind of just testing the waters. And you probably have encountered a customer like this or a potential customer like this, where they're just kind of seeing what their options are. I would not invest time with those kinds of individuals. So I'm looking to understand deeply. What are you hoping to achieve? Have you thought about this? Why now? What are the outcomes that would be optimal for you? And part of that is understanding like what are you going towards? Not just like, oh, I'm done with this business. I'm tired. I'm that age, but I'm ready to start spending time with family again or travel or pick up hobbies again. So those are some things that I'm looking to understand in an initial call. Beyond that, I'm understanding what are the general financial trends of the business over the last 3 years. If they're going up, that's optimal, right? And we will take an average of that kind of performance and use that as the basis for our offer. If it's lumpy or going down, you can still buy businesses like that. I really don't deal in turnarounds, but there's a different formula you would use. And so just understanding kind of what are the financial trends of the business. And then again, I have this, I call it the durability diagnostic. It's for business owners that aren't necessarily looking to sell, but it gives you a really good roadmap on what's going to matter most to a buyer if you decide to sell. And it comes down to 4 pillars. The level of the business depends on the owner. The, again, financial performance and risk, systems and processes and the degree that those are documented. And then lastly, concentration risks. Again, we talked about, a customer, a vendor that if they left, went out of business, were no longer available, could like really have an outsized impact on your business in a negative way.
Okay. And the 3-year rule, why is that the way to go about it? Why not last 12 months or 5 years?
So 3 years gives you kind of a chance to see the trees from the forest. 3 years specifically is what like most investors and banks are going to want to see to
Okay.
establish enough data points. But you'll see this a lot. Many businesses will decide to sell, and they're burned out, or there's a good reason they're trying to get out of business, and they'll juice the numbers. They'll pedal to the metal. Going back to the gas pedal analogy, for 12 months and the numbers will look fantastic. The problem is when you look back, they've been nowhere near that for the last 10 years. And that's not sustainable. And buying a business with that expectation would be a mistake. And so it just kind of stretches out the number of data points that you have to understand, again, once I take over, is this likely to
Gotcha.
persist? And again, you can buy one that's like got that kind of hockey stick 1 year outlier, but just know that that's probably not sustainable.
Yeah. But that should put a red light on.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. They've probably done things, one of the things that many owners are surprised to discover is not all revenue is good. They've probably made some really bad choices to like get a lot more revenue that, when you take over as the new owner, you're not going to want to inherit.
Okay. Yeah. So then when people are looking to buy these businesses, if I guess like, when people are, you said a year where they might, let's say pump the books or something like that, right? You can't go back 2 years, 3 years as well. So that kind of gives you probably a more accurate picture, unless they're just shopping the business. And I guess if you can find that information, how long they're shopping and trying to sell their business, that's probably also a good indication of if it's a good purchase or not.
Yeah. And there's a buyer for every business. So they may have just not found the right buyer, or they may not have the right strategy. Again, if you're trying to attract a strategic buyer. So like, let's say I built an electrical practice, a strategic buyer would be a competing electrical practice, across town. If you're trying to market to them, it might not be attractive to them, or there might be reasons why they don't want to, it's too complicated for them to try to marry your competing lines or rebrand or whatever. But it would be great for an institutional buyer, a strategic buyer. So if I have an electrical practice and a competing electrical practice wants to buy it, that'd be an institutional buyer. A strategic, though, might manufacture electrical components and they want to get into the installation space. So you've never marketed to them, but now they actually have a tremendous reason and would find you extremely valuable to purchase. And it's about going, again, like understanding what are the outcomes, who's going to be interested in that. It's a lot of kind of positioning and marketing once you have clarity, which is, again, something that webinar is really focused on giving business owners.
This is the webinar that you talk about, right?
Yeah, every Thursday I do a weekly webinar for business owners that are just curious about exits. There's no sales pitch or anything. It's literally just like I was teaching everybody for free and having this conversation multiple times a week. And I was like, okay, on Thursdays, we're going to answer all your questions. Here you go.
Yeah. Or if they're listening to this podcast because you've answered so many questions, what about it, like in terms of capital and stuff? People that are like, hey, I want to change things, right? For whatever reasons we spoke about, like people are always thinking like, all right, next 5 years, I want to do something else, right? Maybe buy a business, right? In terms of capital, like how much are we talking about?
The answer that's annoying is it's going to depend. It depends on the size of business you're going after, your credibility. Again, being focused and staying in your lane is going to increase your odds that you're going to have to bring very little money to the table. If you're a journeyman electrician and you walk up to another, electrical practice owner and you say, I've run crews. I know electrical in and out, and I want to buy your business. And you're heading off into the sunset anyways. There's a great chance you're going to have to bring very little capital to the table, or even if you don't have a lot of money, because the banks are going to be like, oh, that makes sense, right? But that same electrical journeyman tries to go in and say like, I'm done with electrical. I want to get into plumbing. I've always wanted to, turn pipes. You're probably going to have to bring a lot more to make everybody feel comfortable that you're going to be successful. It comes down to risk. Same if you're going to go and get investors. You can get investors who will bring most, if not all, of the capital you need to make a business acquisition. There's great loan vehicles. There's all kinds of investors out there, but it comes down to perceived risk. And so I guess the safe rule of thumb, let's say you don't have that much experience. You're going to go get a loan for it, and they're going to have you bring, 10% of that loan value yourself. That's what you're looking at. So if you're buying, like $1 million business, you should plan on bringing $100,000 into that equity injection. Plus, this is a sneaky one, post-close liquidity. So that just means you need money to be able to spend and invest in the business after you close in case anything goes sideways. And again, they also expect that J curve, investors, bankers, all of them. And so that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah. So I want to just go back to that J curve because let's just say you have that first time buyer, right? We're not talking about the seller now. We spoke about the seller. Let's talk about the buyer. Someone buys a business, right? Blood, sweat, and tears. They put up their own capital. They took a lot of risk by getting a loan to buy the business, right? And we do have that J factor, like in terms of like you have to understand the people that are working in the business already, right? You want to make sure that they feel comfortable and no one's going to just, cause a mutiny or something and everyone's going to jump ship, right? But on the other hand, and that would obviously, favor like, okay, let's slide into this slowly and let's keep the old founder on board for a little bit longer, right? But on the other hand, right, that person's like, I got to start pedal to the metal and start making sure that this was a right investment for myself, right? So how do you balance that from the buyer's perspective?
That goes back to why we look at 3 years, because you just want to understand like what is reasonable for me to expect out of the business. And if you pay top dollar for something at the peak of what it could possibly do, That's a huge differential that you're going to probably settle back down to earth pretty quickly. And maybe even dip below that post acquisition. So it's really about, do I have a plan for this? And again, that's why stabilization post acquisition is the number one priority. It's like, I'm not focused on changing and making, like, taking territory. I just want to like hold everything I've got. I want to make sure my team feels good about things. I want to know what their headaches are. I want to make sure my customers, and that comes down to having a plan. This is where most business acquisitions go off the rails, is there's just no plan. They think that the hard part is getting to the point of signing the purchase and sale agreement, and like that's the hard thing. That is the easy, once you sign that, the easiest part of your journey is behind you. Now you're taking on employees. You're understanding like, oh, great. I signed. And the next day, our biggest customer, filed for bankruptcy, right? Or a lawsuit comes in. Like, those kinds of things are what can potentially happen. And so it's just about stabilizing, and you don't have to build it to the moon day one. Can you? Can you be aggressive? Yes. And are there going to be, the flip side risks? Yes. But I'm a slow and steady person. Now, there are people that go out there and buy businesses for the explicit purpose of buying 3 or 4 that are similar, bundling them together and selling them to a bigger fish. That's how most people think in this industry. I think that's incredibly destructive. And again, you're not worried about people staying or leaving or, anything like that, because you're going to sell it before it's your problem. So it kind of depends on what your goals are as well as a buyer.
Stabilization is normal in terms of scaling, right? You obviously want to continue that trajectory, but the first thing is just keeping things even keeled, and then go up and scale the business.
Yeah, absolutely. At K&L Gates, they were going through massive growth. That's the law firm I referenced at the top of the interview. And they acquired, 4 or 5, I can't remember, law offices in Australia, and put themselves on the map in Australia. And like, realistically, nothing changed for months. And then slowly we started, aligning different product offerings and making tweaks to the brand and things like that to bring them close into alignment. But there was nothing overnight. And again, they had teams of people that were dedicated to this and resources. It wasn't a resource issue. It was, let's not break anything and make sure that people feel great about where we're going as we build into the future for a legacy.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. So that's really very, very, very insightful, just about buying businesses and selling businesses and scaling and getting everything to grow, which is what Built to Scale is all about. And like you said, Built to Last is definitely, one foolproof way to make sure that you're scaling. How can listeners find you? I know you mentioned that webinar that you have weekly. Where can people get a hold of you?
I post all of my best solutions, learnings, failures on Instagram. So if you go and find me, I'm the David Hori. That's Hori. On Instagram, you'll find a link to the webinar as well, and you can get signed up for that. Going to www.topline.ops is also going to get you connected with the webinar, me, my team, and I don't know if this is okay, but for anybody that listens to this too, I mentioned a durability diagnostic that gives business owners kind of that prioritized roadmap of like, if I wanted to sell, what do buyers care about most, and where are the biggest risks in my business, even if I don't want to sell. And so for anybody listening, we're doing a beta on that. And so reach out to the team, and we'll hook you up with a durability diagnostic before it's public.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all for that. So thank you very much for coming on the Built to Scale podcast today. It's been an amazing lesson. First of all, people are, if they own businesses, like David said, you should definitely think about how you can sell your business. But more importantly, for people that don't own businesses, they might think it's a little daunting. Definitely get in touch with David. He knows what he's doing. And he could help you maybe buy your first business and grow it to the moon.
Shmuel, I appreciate you sharing your platform with me. Thank you so much.
Listening to the Built to Scale podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a conversation about what it really takes to build and scale in today's market. For more information about Built to Scale and how we help companies grow, visit builttoscale.co. If you have suggestions for future guests or topics, send us a note at podcast@builttoscale.co. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is your host, Shmuel Hirschberg. And remember to keep building, keep testing, and keep scaling.